Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the Bodega Cat Book Club Financial Edition. And today we're continuing our reading of Gold Warriors by Sterling and Peggy Seagrave. So the subtitle is called America's Secret Recovery of Yamashita's Gold. So this particular book was inspired by current events, if you will, especially in the financial sector, and in particular, precious metals. I thought it would be interesting to read about, or to learn about some of the hidden histories, if you will, um, relating to precious metals. And in this particular book, it's about gold. So fascinating subject, gold. Anyways, that's where the inspiration is from. And first of all, I want to welcome everybody. If you like what we do here, please do consider checking out our other book clubs. We have our spiritual book clubs on Mondays and health book clubs on Wednesdays. And we put all the books that we read or are reading, both past books as well as present books on YouTube. And we have it on a playlist. So you guys can just download it and listen to it when you're walking your dog or jogging or in the gym or stuck in traffic, whatever it is that you do, you guys can do that. And we have other content on there as well, not just our book club. So please do check it out and like and subscribe and comment and all that good stuff. And if you have a book that you would like to recommend for us to read, I'll leave a link in the description box below for you guys to fill out. It could be a spiritual book or a health book, or it could be a financial book. So we'd love to see what's in your library and we'd love to share it with the world. And if you feel so inclined, please do consider checking out and subscribing to our free monthly newsletter. And if you want to support us further, you can buy me a coffee, leave a donation. Check out our merch. We have many different merches for your fur babies, for your kitties and doggies, as well as humans. And we're always updating or upgrading our designs or putting out new designs. So please come back and check it out often and support us that way. And if you are in the Los Angeles area or visiting LA, please do come visit us in our healing center. We have a healing center that we use technologies based on Nikola Tesla's scalar wave research for holistic healing for both domestic cats and dogs as well as humans. So please do read about that on our website, read about the technology and as well as our other services. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to meet you in person and we'd love to get to know you and welcome you to our community. So this book, okay, so sorry. So this episode is chapter 7 and it will be part 2. So this book has endnotes at the back of the book. So what I'll usually do for this particular book is that I'll read like a chapter or a section, and then I'll read those endnotes at the end of the book for that particular page. Did I say read a chapter? I meant read it, I'll read a page in that chapter. I'll read a page or so or a section, and then I'll read the endnotes at the end of the book for that particular page. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Because their endnotes have a lot of backstories, if you will. So I like to read that. If it was just references, I'd probably just skip it. But they got some very interesting things to say, these authors. All right, so if you have a book, you could follow with us there. And I'm going to move the camera in a little bit so you guys can see better. So I can see better. If you don't have a book, you can follow with us here. Or if you're just listening, you can just listen. Some people learn by listening, which is an auditory type of learning. Some people learn visually, like me. Some people learn kinesthetically. Ideally, you want to do all three. Um, so that kind of cements the learning process. So anyways, okay, let's do it. All right, again, this is Chapter 7, Part 2. According to various CIA sources, including former Deputy Director Ray Klein, Santa Romana was born in Luzon in 1907, one of several children of Marcelo Diaz. Oh, okay. Marcelo Diaz Santa Romana and Pelagia Garcia. As an adult, he used the names Garcia, Diaz, or Santa Romana interchangeably. Under the name Severino Diaz, he completed his university education in California, where he married a wealthy young heiress, Evangeline Campton. Her family had owned a hotel on Stockton Street in San Francisco at the time of the Great Earthquake and Fire of 1907. After the quake, they rebuilt the hotel and sold it to a new owner, and sold it to new owners who called it the Drake Wilshire. Today, the location still is called Campton Place. The hotel has been renamed the Campton Place Hotel. In the 1930s, Santi took Angelina back to the Philippines, where her inheritance got him started in business, and he became a fringe member of the social circle of MacArthur, Whitney, and Andreas Soriano, owner of San Miguel Brewery and the wealthiest man in the islands. Santi and Angelina had three children named Peter Diaz, Mary Ann Diaz, and Roy Diaz. Angelina is said to have died in the early weeks of World War II when she was killed by a Japanese bomb, leaving the children what was left of her money. Her marriage to Santi had chilled out earlier. In the Catholic Philippines, divorce was illegal. Back in 1936, dropping the name Diaz and using the name Severino Santa Romana, Santi married a pretty school teacher named Julieta Huerto on the island of Mindoro, by whom he later had a daughter named Diana, or called Diana. In his marriage application, Santi claimed to be a schoolteacher himself. These deceptions were necessary because he was committing bigamy. During the war, Santi stayed in the islands, becoming one of Whitney's most effective agents. Therefore, only Whitney, MacArthur's attorney and intimate crony, could have authorized Santi's torture of Major Kojima in September 1945. Whitney never acted without MacArthur's approval, so there can be no question that it was done in the full knowledge of MacArthur and his inner circle. When Japan surrendered, the need for Whitney's special operations officially ceased. Willoughby's G2 Army Intelligence Unit continued to exist, pro forma, but both Willoughby and Whitney accompanied General MacArthur to Japan. The Philippines continued to be Whitney's personal power base and one leg of MacArthur's power base. Whitney and MacArthur watched closely as the trial of General Yamashita got underway. And as we have seen, they interfered often in the legal process. They also stayed informed of the interrogations of Yamashita's staff. Another key figure in MacArthur's Manila circle was Joseph McMicking, whose father was a law partner of Courtney Whitney before the war. When the Japanese invaded, Captain Joe McMicking was made assistant G2 to Major Willoughby. He was among the Bataan boys who fled with MacArthur by PT boat from Corregidor to the Dole Pineapple Estate in Mindanao and onward by plane to Australia. During the torture of Major Kojima in 1945, Colonel McMicking was the immediate G2 superior of Santa Romana and was the interface between Santi in Manila and Whitney and MacArthur in Tokyo. When Major Kojima broke and Santi began recovering billions in gold, McMicking became fantastically wealthy seemingly overnight and married Mercedes Zobel, the heiress of the Zobel Ayala clan of Spanish grandees in the Philippines. In the explosion of wealth in Manila that followed Santi's recoveries, Joe McMicking masterminded the Zobel Ayala clan's acquisition of global real estate, helping create what has become one of the world's great fortunes. While the Zobel Ayala clan was not poor, their pockets were not as deep as McMicking's. The Philippine star called McMicking the real moneybags behind today's colossal Zobo Ayala fortune. In the early 1960s, McMicking and his wife set up the Ayala Foundation to promote vocational education, arts, and livelihood projects in the Philippines. It may be sheer coincidence, but in 1983, it was the Ayala Corporation that bought the rundown Campton Place Hotel in San Francisco and turned it into an elegant and expensive boutique hotel. The OSS only became involved in Santi's interrogation by sheer chance. 8 days after General Yamashita surrendered, Captain Edward G. Lansdale, formerly of the OSS, arrived in Manila by plane from San Francisco and began looking for something to do. Lansdale was deceptively engaging and colorful. Oh, Lansdale was a deceptively engaging and colorful character, the elusive Cheshire cat in our rabbit hole. Later, he became an icon of gigantic mythology as one of America's most famous cold warriors, or infamous, depending on one's point of view. Many novelists, including Graham Greene, used him as the model for obsessive or pathological characters pushing the American way in Asia. Lansdale was always on stage, acting various characters. So evasive was he about his life that the myth he contrived was overwhelmed with facts. Oh, sorry, was has overwhelmed the facts. There are two schools of thought: Lansdale as the savior of Asia, or Lansdale as war criminal and far-right hatchetman. Fletcher Broughty, a U.S. military intelligence officer and historian who shared office space with Lansdale for many years, positively identified Lansdale in in photographs taken during the assassination of President Kennedy. Identification confirmed by others. In the movie JFK, Oliver Stone has a thinly disguised Lansdale involved in the assassination of the president. How an advertising agency wordsmith like Lansdale became such an influential player during the Cold War remained a mystery until now. The missing key is the torture of Major Kojima. When he landed in Manila in 1945, Lansdale was 37 and utterly insignificant. He had spent the entire war in San Francisco writing propaganda for the OSS and having a good time. Lansdale was born in Detroit, 1908, in a strongly religious middle-class family. His mother, a driven Christian Scientist, his father, a devout Presbyterian. As a child, Lansdale was taught by his father all kinds of religious sayings and Sunday school homilies of the sort used in Burma shaped signs along America's rural words. Quote, when the work has once begun, don't leave it until it's done. Be the labor great or small. Do it well or not at all. End quote. In his 40s, he would spout these like a whale for half an hour. As a CIA field agent, he taught the same cute sayings to assassins who worked for him in the Philippines, Vietnam, and Japan, used them as code phrases during covert operations, and recited them to Asian secret police bosses as a benediction. Over the years, Santi picked up this habit of Lansdale's and repeated the same signature homilies even in his last will and testament. What a funny character. Let's read what the endnotes say in the back here for now. Let's see how many page 94. Okay. All right. So the information on Campton family, information on the Campton family comes from members of Santa Romana's family and has been difficult to confirm because records predating the San Francisco earthquake are incomplete. And this the note about Santi telling friends he was with the OSS. Santi always told friends he was with the OSS because that saved a lot of explaining. Santi, like Lansdale and others officially assigned to Army G2, actually were part of the Counterintelligence Corps, CIC. In the Pacific, the CIC was under the control of General Charles Willoughby. The Counterintelligence Corps History and Mission in World War II, published by the Counterintelligence Corps School, Fort Holabird, gives some details about the creation and organization of the CIC and is available online at the Military History Center, Carlisle Barracks. CIC records are scattered throughout the U.S. government because its agents and special agents were given assignments with many different branches of the military and non-military as well. Tracking down the records of the CIC is a hit or miss proposition. The official 30-volume history of the CIC exists in two forms, classified and declassified. But this too is incomplete because the U.S. Army stopped the history project in the 1950s. A few books have written about the CIC, but they're fragmentary and contradictory. At different times, CIC records were routinely burned, eliminating evidence about its agents and activities. The note about Joseph McMicking, his father was admitted to the Philippine bar in 1907. The note about McMicking's global real estate. McMicking acquired and built the 4,400-acre luxury resort at Soto Grande, Spain, which includes a big yacht harbor and a world-class golf course. McMicking bought the acreage for Soto Grande in 1962, and it is now a haven for wealthy exiles. In the 1960s, Marcos invested in the resort. This information comes from W. Scott Malone's memo of Investigation for Frontline, October 24, 1986. CIA document analysis, page 3. Malone's memo states that Marcos' children were nominees in the project, but Malone was unaware of the McMicking-MacArthur Santa Romana connection. Okay, I think we are, yep, okay. Let's pause there for now for the end notes, and we'll continuing in our chapter here. During the Depression, Lansdale had studied journalism at UCLA, where he was in the Army Reserve Program. Following graduation, he worked as a copywriter for ad agencies in Los Angeles and San Francisco, where his quirky jingles served him well. When he heard about Pearl Harbor, he quit his job and enlisted in the Army, getting a choice billet, dreaming up psychological warfare gimmicks for the Military Intelligence Service and then for the OSS. Sitting behind a desk in San Francisco, he passed his days thinking about how to demoralize Japanese troops. A pamphlet he wrote called From the Serpent's Mouth took old Japanese proverbs and used them to point out Japan's wartime blunders. Quote, the man who makes the first bad move always loses the game, end quote. Remember Pearl Harbor. Remember Pearl Harbor, end quote. Chance entered Lansdale life in a big way when President Truman ordered the OSS closed down at the end of September 1945. In the weeks remaining to them, General Donovan and his deputy, Brigadier General John Magruder, looked for ways to preserve personnel and OSS overseas networks by shifting them to other intelligence services, to other government agencies, and in some cases even to private American corporations like General Electric that could afford to sustain clusters of secret agents in various parts of the world for commercial intelligence and as a favor to Washington. Captain Lansdale was one of 50 OSS office staff who were given a chance to transfer to General Willoughby's G2 section in the Philippines, headed by Colonel McMicking. When Lansdale arrived in Manila, he was shocked by his first sight of war close up. The city was in ruins following the rampage by Admiral Iwabuchi's large force of Marines and sailors. Lansdale heard grisly stories and conceived a loathing for Japanese because of their excessive cruelty. In his journal entries from the 1940s, he told of this hatred. An entry dated November 10th, 1946 says, quote, many of the Filipinos were tortured until they were just broken lumps of bleeding flesh, end quote. In his office at G2, Lansdale discovered files describing gold being hidden by Japanese soldiers and heard of Santi's interrogation of Major Kojima. Electrified, he seized the initiative, taking administrative control of Santi's interrogation. Lansdale was able to do this because most of MacArthur's team, including Willoughby's senior staff officers, were in Japan. In Manila, Lansdale had the G2 office more or less to himself. He galvanized his Filipino and American clerical staff to make a painstaking search of the files of all mentions of Japanese war loot. After all, later, all he was willing to say about it was, quote, the G2's office at our headquarters held a treasury of reports whose contents I had to master for my daily work. I gave my intelligence group the task of sorting through what we already knew and obtaining further facts, end quote. Santi was extracting those further facts from Major Kojima. Early in October, after many days of torture, Kojima broke and revealed everything he knew. Lansdale organized a convoy of cars and set out with Santi and Major Kojima to retrace the trips made by General Yamashita to more than a dozen Golden Lily treasure vaults. These were all in the high valleys north of Manila, in a triangle from Bagao in the west to Bambang in the center, and Apari at the northern tip of Luzon. Okay, let's stop here for now and look at read the endnotes in the back. Okay, I think I'm on page 95. All right. So the endnote about McMicking as a real money bag. McMicking as the real money bags is from the Philippine Star. And here is a URL, philstar.com /data /D23 underscore Fed23 /EDI6.htm. McMicking's Ayala Foundation at www.phillib.org.ph /AFI. The the note about Ayala Campton Place Hotel. Ayala Campton Place Hotel and its multi-million-dollar refurbishment is from the hotel's online sites. The note about two schools of thought about Lansdale. You could find that in Nashville, Edward Lansdale. Photos, documents, and bank documents naming Lansdale are included on our CD. Lansdale becomes a multiple missing link between all Cold War events and their supposed sources, between elites and the general public, between fact and fiction. You can find that in Nashville, Edward Lansdale, page 6 and 13. See Valentine, Operation Phoenix, for an unvarnished view of Lansdale as a man intrigued with torture and atrocity for the power it brought him. The note about Lansdale's ditty. Quote, when the work has once begun, end quote. Santi wrote this same ditty in his holographic will. It must have been very important to Santi to include this clue as he had only a few days to live. The holographic will is produced on our CD. The note about Lansdale birth. Lansdale birth background, UCLA days, ROTC intelligence officer. You can find that in Nashell Lansdale, page 36 and 40. Okay. All right, continuing in our chapter here. During the Depression, Lansdale had studied journalism. Oh, I think I read that. Hold on a second here. Yeah, I read that already. All right, sorry about that. All right, here we go. Continuing in our chapter. Okay, when they returned to Manila in mid-October, Lansdale reported to Colonel McMicking, then flew to Tokyo where he briefed Willoughby, Whitney, and MacArthur. At their instruction, he then flew to Washington to brief General Magruder, who still headed the Strategic Services Unit, a last vestige of the OSS, just before the new Central Intelligence Group, CIG, was created under General Hoyt. General Hoyt Vandenberg. It was Magruder who had moved Lansdale to Manila 2 months earlier. Vandenberg or Magruder then sent Lansdale to the White House to brief President Truman's national security aide, Navy Captain Clark Clifford, and members of the cabinet. President Truman decided to keep the discovery secret and to recover as much of the Japanese loot as possible. At this stage, it is impossible to say precisely how these briefings unfolded and exactly what President Truman did. The secrecy surrounding Santee's recoveries is nearly total. What we do know from two separate high-level sources in the CIA is that Robert B. Anderson flew back to Tokyo with Lansdale for discussions with MacArthur. After some days of meetings, MacArthur and Anderson flew secretly to mountains and to 6 other sites around Apari at the northern tip of Luzon. In the intervening weeks, Santee's men, aided by hand-picked teams from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, had successfully opened several of these vaults, where MacArthur and Anderson were able to stroll down row after row of gold bars. Other sites were opened in subsequent months. In all, the recoveries took 2 years to complete, from late 1945 to early 1947. From what was seen in these vaults and also discovered by U.S. Army investigators in Japan, it became evident that over a period of decades, Japan had looted billions of dollars worth of gold, platinum, diamonds, and other treasures from all over East and Southeast Asia. Much of this had reached Japan by sea or overland from China through Korea, but a lot had been hidden in the Philippines. Washington's official public figure for recovered Nazi gold still is only 550 metric tons, but Anderson knew better. One of his business associates saw photos in Anderson's office of an American soldier, quote, sitting on top of stacks of bullion that Hitler had stolen from Poland, Austria, Belgium, and France. It ended up with the Allied High Command and no one was allowed to talk about it, end quote. The same source said he was taken to the courtyard of a convent in Europe where 11,200 metric tons of Nazi looted bullion had been collected. After the Nazi defeat, the OSS and other Allied intelligence organizations searched Germany and Austria for art treasures and looted gold. Soviet troops and special units did the same in the Russian zone. More is known of what happened to the recovered art than to the recovered gold. When 100 tons of Nazi gold were recovered from a salt mine near Merkers, Germany, the truck convoy carrying it to Frankfurt vanished. It was said to have been hijacked, but the more likely explanation is that this gold was among the bullion stacked in the convent courtyard. The reason for all this discretion was a top secret project, sometimes called Black Eagle, a strategy first suggested to President Roosevelt by Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson and his wartime advisors, John J. McCloy, later head of the World Bank, Robert Lovett, later Secretary of Defense, and Robert B. Anderson, later Secretary of the Treasury. Stimson proposed using all recovered Axis war loots, Nazi, fascist, and Japanese, to finance a global political action fund. Because it would be difficult, if not impossible, to determine who were the rightful owners of all the looted gold, better to keep its recovery quiet and set up a trust to help friendly governments stay in power after the war. This was informally called the Black Eagle Trust after the German Black Eagle, referring to Nazi bullion marked with an eagle and swastika, recovered from underground vaults of the Reichsbank. Okay, we'll stop here for now and read the end notes. That's 96. Okay. All right, the notes about Lansdale advertising accounts. Lansdale had advertising accounts of Wells Fargo's bank, the Union Trust Company, and Levi Strauss and Company. You can find that in Nashville, page 37. The Wells Fargo Bank later received Santa Romana assets and was named in a lawsuit filed by Melvin Belli in 1993, which was reproduced in full on our CD. The note about Pearl Harbor. Lansdale was then working for an ad agency. See Lansdale in the Midst of Wars, page 4. The note about Lansdale psyops. Lansdale psyops and the Serpent's Mouth, quoted from Nashville, page 53 and 54. The note about the course of Lansdale's career. Quote, I served with the OSS for a time, then became an Army intelligence officer, end quote. Lansdale was carefully vague about details of his career, but he was a captain at the end of World War II, assigned to Intelligence Division of the G2 in Manila, and later was promoted to major as Deputy G2 of the Army Command before he returned to America in November 1948. He told a congressional hearing, quote, I served in the Philippine Islands toward the end of World War II and stayed in the Philippine Islands and organized the Philippine Islands Intelligence Service, end quote. Actually, he did not get sent to the Philippines until September 1945, when the war had already ended. And you can find that in Nashville, page 4, page 11, page 137, and page 170, note 31. The note about Lansdale's hatred of Japanese. Lansdale's hatred of Japanese and the terrible things he saw in Manila. His journal entry. Nashville, page 189 to 190, page 220, note 30. Lansdale justified his own use of torture and atrocity as an appropriate response. See Lansdale in the Midst of Wars, page 72. The note about Treasury of Reports. Lansdale's team roving the Philippines happened between September 1945 and July 1946. You can find that in Lansdale in the Midst of Wars, page 5 and 6. Okay, continuing our reading in the chapter. All right. According to some sources, the Black Eagle Trust could only have been set up with the corporation of the most powerful banking families in America and Europe, including the Rockefellers, Harrimans, Rothschilds, Oppenheimers, Warburgs, and others. A brilliant Wall Street attorney, Stimson was a man of immense experience who had served in various posts for 5 presidents: Taft, Coolidge, Hoover, Roosevelt, and Truman. But he was nearing the end of his extraordinary career. He knew Manila intimately, having served as Governor General of the Philippines in the 1920s. President Herbert Hoover had then named him Secretary of State. Like Hoover, Stimson thought highly of MacArthur. By Pearl Harbor, Stimson was already in his 70s. He managed this vast wartime responsibilities by delegating authority to 4 assistant secretaries of war: Robert Patterson, a lawyer and former federal judge; Harvey Bundy, Boston lawyer and Yale graduate, and two dynamos Stimson called his heavenly twins, John McCloy and Robert Levitt. What they all had in common was their close relationship to the Harrimans and Rockefellers. Levitt's father had been the right-hand man of railway magnate E. H. Harriman, who once tried to buy the South Manchurian Railway from the Japanese. Following in his father's footsteps, Robert Lovett worked with Averill Harriman at the Wall Street firm of Brown Brothers Harriman, handling international currency and lending operations. John J. McCloy, by contrast, was a poor boy from Philadelphia who graduated from Harvard Law School, joined the Cravath firm on Wall Street, and gained the admiration of Averill Harriman by helping get $77 million worth of bond issues for the Union Pacific Railroad. McCloy engineered such deals for everyone from the House of Morgan on down. Working for Secretary of War, Stimson, Lovett, and McCloy became midwives at the birth of America's post-war national security establishment, which was closely interwoven with the financial community. McCloy was a troubleshooter, an expert fixer. He said his job was, quote, to be at all points of the organizational charts where the lines did not quite intersect, end quote. He made endless trips around the world during the war, solving problems, working with statesmen, bankers, and generals. He was intensely involved in backstage strategy and understood, to borrow from Cicero, that, quote, the sinew of war is in unlimited money, end quote. Money also was to be the sinew of the Cold War. A wheeler dealer, McCloy knew all the ins and outs of international finance. After the war, he became a partner in the law firm of Milbank Tweed, which handled the affairs of the Rockefeller family and its Chase Bank, became a leader of the Council on Foreign Relations, head of the World Bank, chairman of Chase, and head of the Ford Foundation. He may have been the key player in executing the Black Eagle Trust, the one who took Stimson's idea and turned it into a working reality. By comparison, Robert B. Anderson got off to an inauspicious start. Born in Burleson, Texas on June 4, 1910, he taught high school for a while before studying law at the University of Texas. He was elected to the state legislature and appointed Assistant Attorney General for Texas in 1933 and State Tax Commissioner the following year. Then something clicked, and Anderson left government to become an extraordinarily successful financial consultant to very rich people. By the early 1940s, he was general manager of the enormously wealthy W.T. Waggoner's estate, which owned ranch land and oil land all over Texas. Anderson was so deft at money management that President Roosevelt appointed him a special aide to Secretary of Clark Clifford, Truman's aide for national security matters, who was briefed by Captain Lansdale, was Anderson's protege and intimate friend. Together, Anderson and Clifford became major power brokers in post-war Washington. Although Stimson retired from public life in 1945, and McCloy also left government service at that time, they and Anderson continued to be involved in overseeing the Black Eagle Trust. According to former CIA Deputy Director Ray Klein, the gold bullion recovered by Santa Romana was put, quote, in 176 bank accounts in 42 countries, end quote. Anderson apparently traveled all over the world setting up these black gold accounts, providing money for political action funds throughout the non-communist world. Later, we closely examined several. In 1953, to reward him, President Eisenhower nominated Anderson to a cabinet post as Secretary of the Navy. The following year, he rose to Deputy Secretary of Defense. During the second Eisenhower administration, he became Secretary of the Treasury, serving from 1957 to 1961. After that, Anderson resumed private life, but remained intimately involved with the CIA's worldwide network of banks set up after the war by Paul Halliwell. Eventually, This led to Anderson becoming involved in BCCI, the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, an Arab Pakistani bank with CIA ties that parlayed money laundering and the discreet movement of black gold into ownership of the biggest bank in Washington, D.C. The collapse of BCCI in what the Wall Street Journal called, the world's largest bank fraud, also snared Anderson's protege, Clark Clifford, who was indicted for fraud. Clifford and his associate, Robert Altman, headed First American Bank shares, the BCCI front, in the nation's capital, and were accused of using political patronage to shield BCCI from full investigation. Anderson's reputation began to crumble when it was revealed by Bernard Nossiter in the Washington Post that he had sought and received $290,000 from a Texas oil man while serving as Eisenhower's Secretary of the Treasury. Anderson later pleaded guilty to federal charges of tax evasion and money laundering and died in disgrace. It is beyond the scope of this book to continue how Anderson, McCloy, and the others administered the Black Eagle Trust from the top down. Because so much of the documentation is still sealed, we must content ourselves with evidence that has surfaced so far, and the players we know were involved in the field. But by looking briefly at what is known about the public side of the arrangements made at Bretton Woods, we find a window into the secret side. Okay, let's stop here for now and read the endnotes in the back here. Let's see here. Okay, so, all right, so the note about the secret trip of MacArthur and Anderson. We know about the secret trip of MacArthur and Anderson from Tokyo to Manila, and the tour they were given by Lansdale and Santa Romana, and other details we describe from separate sources in the CIA that independently confirmed each other. We are satisfied that these sources are reliable. Alan Foranger, see Chapter 14, also knew about the Anderson trip and told Robert Curtis about this. One day, when Foranger was giving Ray Klein a tour of some treasure sites in the Philippines, Klein remarked to Foranger that, quote, it reminded him of the Anderson tour, end quote. Curtis to authors, April 2nd, 2001. These basic details were confirmed independently by Gary Thompson of the Las Vegas Sun in discussions he had with senior CIA sources. It appears that Mike Mansfield learned of these things when he paid a visit to Tokyo in 1947. That was also the year that Alexander Haig became a personal aide to MacArthur. See Chapter 9. Okay, so the note about the fate of Major Kojima. We do not know the fate of Major Kojima. We were told he committed suicide in his prison cell using a sharpened butter knife obtained from another prisoner, but we have been unable to confirm this. But see Chapter 17. The note about the 550 tons of Nazi gold. Officially, there were 550 tons of Nazi gold recovered, but 11,200 tons of unofficial Nazi gold. C. Thompson, Search for the Tiger's Treasure, the Las Vegas Sun, 1993. The note about Stimson, Hoover, and MacArthur, you can find that in Schaller, Far Eastern General, page 12 and 13. The note about Patterson, Bundy, McCloy, and Lovett. You can find that in Isaacson and Thomas, The Wise Men, page 191 to 192. Lovett died in 1986. Isaacson and Thomas, The Wise Men, page 736. Lovett and Brown Brothers Harriman. Isaac and Thomas, The Wise Men, page 21 and 111 to 112. The note about McCloy's work for Cravath before World War II. McCloy's work for Cravath before World War II Friendships with Harriman and Lovett, Isaacson and Thomas, The Wise Men, page 119 to 125. McCloy and Lovett's central role in the post-war national security establishment. You can find that in Isaac and Thomas, The Wise Men, page 192. To be at all the points is McCloy. Isaacson and Thomas, Wise Men, page 192. McCloy became the U.S. High Commissioner for Germany and by 1951 had arranged for clemency to be granted to a number of Nazi war criminals, including every single German industrialist who had been convicted at the Nuremberg trials. You can find that at Simpson, The Splendid Blonde Beast, page 271. The note about McCloy went to work for Milbank Tweed, which Milbank Tweed. I don't know what that means. Okay. McCloy went to work for Milbank Tweed, which handled the affairs of the Rockefeller family and the Chase Bank. You can find that in Isaacson and Thomas, The Wise Men, page 336. The note about McCloy in the Council on Foreign Relations, you can find that in Isaacson and Thomas, The Wise Men, page 336. McCloy died in 1989. His papers are at the Amherst College archives, purged of secrets. The note about Ray Klein on Santa Romana's 176 bank accounts. See the Ackerman letter reproduced on our CD. The note about Paul Hallowell setting up CIA banks. Paul Hallowell set up CIA banks, including Nugan Hand. So you could find that in Seagrave, the Marcos Dynasty BCCI is mentioned in Santa Romana documents reproduced on our CDs. Did we read that? Let me see. I think we did. Let me see. Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. I just want to get my bearings here. Just make sure I'm reading the right stuff. Okay. So the note about details on BCCI and First American Bank shares. Details on BCCI and First American Bank shares are from the Wall Street Journal, September 29, 1998. See also Robert B. Anderson at www.history.navy.mil, also www.treas.gov. You could also find that in L.J. Davis, The Name of the Rose in the New Republic, April 4th, 1994. BCCI's Criminality at sun00781.dn.net/IRPs/Congress/1992. The note about indictment of Clifford. Anderson pleaded guilty and died in disgrace. You can find that in Adams, The American Spectator, December 1996, available online. And the note about year zero, you could find that in Grabby or Grab, The Rise and Fall of Bretton Woods, www.aci.net/Bretton_Woods.htm. Very interesting. Okay, we'll stop here for now. It's a very interesting section, eh? Let me know what you think. Kind of reads like a Hollywood story almost. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. Leave your comments below. I'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you next time in our next book club. Okay, bye now.